Okay, Bato's Crystal Radio that we make and we supply. Okay, this is a very latest version of the Crystal Radio that we actually, sort of version 2, you could call it. The version 1 basically consists just of the Crystal Radio itself. It has got the volume control that you can control the output of the audio output. That you're going to feed into your own amplifier type of thing, or the headphones. So if the volume is too loud, because remember one thing, this is a medium wave, and of course it's not a hi-fi quality reproduction sound. It is basically a radio that was very first radio that was made something like 130 years ago. And it has got a sort of a sentimental value to a lot of people because it's a part of the human history. That's when the electronics actually started. So I decided, because of the demand from the customers, besides sort of adding a variable volume control that I made, and it works quite well, I decided to start making amplified version. There was designed a little amplifier, which is about 2 centimeter by 2.5 centimeter, fairly powerful and capable of driving 6-inch speaker. And if you look at it at the back, you can actually see it's quite a biggish magnet. So it's quite a bit of a volume that it actually gives. And the nicest thing is, for the radio itself, it would be still the same Crystal Radio, okay, with the latest version with the volume control, and it has got the capacitor over here that you actually attach to change the tone and to maybe kill the noise, because it is an AM radio, and the AM radios basically. They have got a very long wavelength. They do travel quite a sort of distance, more than the FM band, but they're not the hi-fi quality sort of sets. So this particular, it's not for everyday use. It's more for prestige, as an ornament, as a collector's item, and things like that. But nonetheless, instead of, if you don't have the amplifier with a high input or a high input earphones, headphones to connect up over here, I decided to add this amplifier, as I said, and it's capable of driving. So in other words, basically gets connected over here, as you can see. Let me just do it, but difficult with one hand. But for the radio, you don't require the power whatsoever. Okay, gets the power through the antenna, which basically, if you look at it, I got the ground wire, okay, perfectly matched, which I'm going to connect it up over here. And then, of course, here is my antenna wire. And that's my antenna wire that I'm going to connect it up over there. Okay, now, basically now, the radio is already picking up the station, type of thing. Of course, I have to ground it, and you'll see just now. If you don't ground it and you don't have a sort of perfect antenna, you won't really get a sort of music or any voice out of the radio. So besides, the properly tuned coil, the sort of properly tuned circuit, which we tune by moving the ferrite in and out and varying the inductance of the actual coil, which in turn is connected with the capacitor, fixed value capacitor, which sort of gets perfectly tuned at the frequency of the receiving station. Now, once it's and basically lets a maximum signal come into the crystal diode, and all other sort of signals, it rejects them up to a point. And then the actual crystal diode removes the RF component and converts it to audio. And then, of course, goes into amplifier. Now, of course, the amplifier does require some kind of a power, but by using the nice thing about this amp is designed in such a way that it draws very little current. So by using ordinary 9-volt PP3 battery, and especially if it's a Duracell, you'll get more than half a day non-stop listening to the radio station that you tuned at. Let me just fit the battery and then we'll see. Okay, let me just do this. Sorry, but difficult with one hand. Okay, the battery is connected. There we go. Let me just shift this one over here to the side. And now I'm just going to put a bit of a volume, but you won't really hear anything. Okay, now I'm putting the volume and you can't hear anything. But watch now what's going to happen when you add the proper ground, because that's where it actually gets the power, the radio, from the ground and from the actual this piece of wire antenna. Of course, we give the customer recommended much longer antenna for outside use. Right now it's inside, but nonetheless, if the customer wants to obtain very, very far distant stations with this little crystal radio, some people they call it a cat's whisker, but it is cat's whisker, but not in a true sense. But that I have explained in my previous video why. Because the cat's whisker does not use a crystal diode. It uses a material with a very sharp needle type of thing that actually creates a germanium diode. Okay, now without further ado, let me just start doing testing. Okay, I'm just going to connect it up here to the ground, not the perfect ground, but nonetheless for purpose that I actually wanted, because my socket is grounded. So I'm just going to ground it over there, but nonetheless it's not a very, very, very good. Okay, now still no sound. Okay, but watch now when I take antenna and I try to stretch it.
Is this an accurate reading of what has taken place there? No,
look at it there, look at it there. Okay.
Resolve a dispute through court jurisdiction, so to speak.
Okay.
It didn't create a precedent.
Now let me increase the volume.
It doesn't declare what the law is, and it doesn't bind courts or other parties in future cases.
Okay, now that's basically my antenna on the floor. On the floor, it's not even stretched properly. Okay, let me just untie over here. Everything is in knots.
Under constitutional protections for
okay, let me just do this.
That has been especially preserved. In other words, it is not part of the settlement.
Okay,
so the document
now,
doesn't answer that question. It actually leaves the question open.
Of course, you've got to tune it now.
Landmark ruling.
Now the antenna is basically, let me just stretch it a little bit, because you do need a signal to supply to the actual radio. Now watch when I tune it.
Agreement between the two parties an enforceable force. So that's a very different exercise. The deeper arguments about how South Africa accommodates genuinely divergent worldviews between, obviously in this case, same-sex orientation and the rights that they're under in the Constitution and religious freedom.
Okay, right now it's off. And I made a very nice little homemade potentiometer, trying to bring the cost down. Of course, by removing this particular cap and fitting a capacitor, a proper tuning capacitor, you can actually seek for various and putting a much bigger antenna, you can tune to various stations. But as I said, this type of capacitors are extremely expensive. So I decided to go with the fixed, and this particular crystal radio will only lock onto the highest signal available on the AM in your area. And, it will keep on fading, come louder, softer, because that is the nature of the actual, depends on the propagation circumstances at that particular time, whether it's a winter, whether it's a cold, hot, raining and so on. But anyway, one more time, let me try with my little amplifier. As I said, I'm just going to increase the input to the amp now.
Not giving a judgment, not setting a precedent, not making a definitive ruling on the facts, or even on the constitutional questions that potentially underlie this case. Where does it...
You see, if I remove it, it's out of tune. Of course, if I have got now a different, much longer antenna, or maybe a tuning capacitor, I could tune for maybe a different stations even inside. But nonetheless, let me tune back to the
question. When rights conflict, you have to balance them. So Section 9 protects the equality and it prohibits unfair discrimination. Section 15 protects religious freedom, conscience, thought, belief, and opinion.
So that's basically the long and the short. I'm quite pleased with the actual results because the amplifier requires very little power, and at the full volume it will play more than a half a day. Of course, I'm using a rechargeable battery, and I can always recharge it up in with. I can even connect a solar panel to it, and then it will operate, because the amplifier is capable of operating from 4 to like 16 volta. So it's not a problem. So any solar panel will drive it. And basically you got a radio without the batteries that can play 24 hours a day. Of course, as I said, one must not expect miracles out of the set, because it is not your everyday high fidelity sort of sound quality and things like that. But nonetheless, for radio without the power and a tiny little sort of battery pack or tiny little power required for the amp, it is a miracle set. So on that note, I end it, and I might come with the extra sort of version but that would be at a later stage. So follow the channel. Thank you for watching from Bato's Radio and TV.